that Birmingham is the only program in the state that offers this master's program. The examination results we have, the testing company does not record which state the candidate is from, so we didn't have specific state information available for the national exam. Licenses are valid for 2 years, and 99% of the renewals are done online by this board. Their significant issues are on page 5. We have one significant issue that related to the execution of multiple emergency contracts during the sunset review period. The board also operated without a contract in place for 3 periods of time between October 1st of 2021 and September 2023. So during the first year of the board's financial operations, the boards utilized Smith Warren Management Services for their administrative services provider. The services were paid via a purchase order approved by the Finance Department at a rate of $1,000 per month from March 1st of 2021 through September 30th of 2021. Upon the expiration of that purchase order, the board operated without a contract in place from October to December of 2021, but the board continued to pay the $1,000 per month during this period despite no contract being in place. On January 5th of 2022, the board submitted an emergency contract with Smith Warren Management Services for a 12-month period at a rate of $1,000 per month plus cost. The very next month, on February 10th of 2022, they entered into a second emergency contract with Smith Warren Management Services for a period of 12 months at an increased rate of $2,500 a month plus cost. In January of 2023, they entered a third emergency contract with Smith Warren that was through June 30th of 2023 at the same rate of $2,500 per month. And then on September 11th of 2023, they entered into a fourth emergency contract for administrative services, and this was pending the completion of the request for proposals process. The board operated without a contract in place from July 1st of 2023 through September 10th of 2023. And again, the board continued to pay $2,500 a month during this period despite no contract being in place. The board did issue an RFP on August 29th of 2023. They submitted a contract between the board and Smith Warren to be reviewed by the Legislative Contract Review Committee at the December 2023 meeting. The contract was held by the committee and was not signed by the governor until January 16th of 2024. And the current contract is for a 12-month period at a rate of $3,000 per month. The next two issues are significant issues from questionnaires that came up from the surveys, and those found that 67% of the board members responding to our survey expressed concerns about the ability to have virtual meetings to meet quorum. The second issue is 29% of licensees responding to our survey expressed concerns about the lack of patient access to reproductive health care. If we go on to page 8, you can see that we have the board's number of licensees for each fiscal year covered. They started out in 2021, that's when they started issuing licenses, so that's why it's a little lower. It increased, it dropped off a little in 2023, but then midways of 2024, it's back up to 344. We do not have any complaint data in this report because the board did not have any complaints filed during this period. Their financial information is on pages 9 and 10. They had an unobligated cash balance at the end of 2023 of $260,972.19. Their board members are towards the back of your report, and they do have a vacant seat right now. It is the seat that is appointed by the Lieutenant Governor, and that is the physician that should specialize in pediatric genetics. And the board has sent letters and was able to show us that they have been working to get that seat filled.
Any of those letters go outside the Birmingham postal code?
Use your mic so we can all hear you.
I just want to ask if any of those letters went outside that Birmingham postal code. If you look, four of the 8 give a direct Birmingham address. 2 of the remaining, one lives in Trussville and one lives in Hoover. I'm very thankful they have one in Spanish Fort. That's where I'm from, and you also have ones from Owens Cross Road. But there seems to be a tendency of these boards to focus heavily on a specific area of Alabama when they're naming members of the board. And look, if we want to start naming these boards the genetic board of Jefferson County, let's do it.
Dixie, I have a question on quorums. Are they having trouble making quorums? And since they're all in the general area, I'm trying to figure out how that's difficult.
Yes, ma'am, and they are allowed to meet by electronic means, and so there was an act passed in 2022 that says that, so they have a 9-member board. So a quorum of that board is 5, and so the majority of the quorum is 3. So they have to have 3 members physically present to be able to meet, and so they have to get 3 people physically present for the board meeting, and the other people can be virtual.
So are they saying they've had trouble doing that?
Yes, ma'am. That's what they said in their surveys.
Okay. And then I have another question on their internet presence. They don't have their board meetings, but do they have a link to the board meetings or the minutes of the board meetings?
No, ma'am, we did not. The minutes of the board meetings were not included on their website.
Okay, I guess we'll just have to ask the board on how hard that is to get all that up there. All right, any other members have any questions?
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair.
Senator Kelly?
I realize this is a new one, Dixie, but we seem to be with this contractor have a repetitive issue from board to board with emergency contracts over and over again when that's what they do, and so there shouldn't be a reason. I read what's wrote in there. Would you like to share any thoughts of why this pattern may be continuing from board to board?
I'm not sure exactly why it happens the way it does. They submit the emergency contracts to the CPO's office, and they have to, it's on the board to remember to do it timely so there's not a lapse, so they're not being paid when there's no contract in place. The board did complete the RFP process once the procurement law changed, and they have done that and done it correctly, and the contract is in place for a year and it has options to renew.
Thank you.
Representative Underwood?
To echo Senator Kelly on that, I think maybe I need a description of what an emergency contract is at some point in time, because I agree, it seems like so many boards have so many multiple instances of emergency contracts. Maybe I'm misinterpreting the word emergency on that. And I don't know if we have that defined anywhere or if it's just stated, but I think maybe for my clarification purposes, if I could know what the definition of an emergency contract is and the purpose of it, I think that might help me going forward on these. And I don't know if there's one. There might be a ruling defining on what an emergency contract is.
We can get you copies of the contract, actual emergency contracts that we all the board said it was for.
Yeah, I was thinking more like generically, there's currently an allowance for emergency contracts in the state of Alabama. And it almost seems like that's getting, that's getting abused is what it seems like to me. But that's why I thought maybe for my personal going forward, what the state of Alabama defines as an emergency contract might help me in how I approach this. But I agree with Senator Kelly that we certainly have a lot of these. Thank you, ma'am.
Can I have another question? The reason, do they have billing insurance as to why this board was created, or is there something that I'm missing statutorily? Do y'all have any reason did they have to have this board in order to get certified in order to bill insurance?
I'm not sure about that.
Okay, I'm gonna wanna know that, because if the board is having difficulty getting a quorum, and they're having difficulty with the management, then I'm wondering, this is a very new board, so when we're looking at whether boards, for what reason they are formed and how they are functioning, that's exactly what we're here to do. So I want to find out some more information about the origin of them.
Okay.
Because I know on one board it was for insurance reasons, they were unable to bill and they didn't have this certification by the state. So I'm interested to find out more information. Any other questions by the members? Senator Stewart, would you like to say hello to everybody? We're announcing as everybody gets here. I know traffic's been bad and weather.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Good afternoon, everyone.
We're finishing up on genetic counseling. Ms. Riddle, were you asking to be recognized?
Well, we can go ahead and cover this now because it's going to be issued in a couple of different sunset reports. The issue about emergency contracts. So I went over it a little bit last sunset review, not last month, but last year. What had been happening, those were considered not a professional service in the state of Alabama. And our department rose the issue that if you're running a board and contracting to run a board and be an executive director, that is a professional service. So we had to get finance to swap over from treatment like just a regular ITB, invitation to bid, to you doing an RFP for a professional service. So some of these emergency contracts happen because of that, and we'll take the blame for that, for trying to straighten that out. But that was, if I remember correctly, back in like 21. So anything that happened probably from 22 on is starting to not be true emergency. And the new law allowed the chief procurement officer to declare when something is an emergency or not. So what happens is the board submits that contract, asks for an emergency contract with finance, the chief procurement officer, and she can deem, and they give the justification, and she can deem whether something is an emergency or not based on their justification.
So, it by definition is probably a moving target based on each situation.
Right, and you have to think about it too. She's weighing letting a contract completely lapse and a board not exist versus trying to teach them, got to get this stuff and do it right and run government correctly.
But it does seem like many times it's just that it wasn't, the process didn't begin in the right time frame. That's what it seems like so many times.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Senator Gavay?
Well, I think that's the overarching theme, it seems like, is that they're not properly prepared. They know the contract's going to expire. They know it needs to be reevaluated, and they don't handle it. And it happens repeatedly. And it's something I'm getting tired of.
It happens in the next one.
Any further questions from the members on this board? Okay, let's move on to interpreters and transliterators, please.
Yes, ma'am. The Alabama Licensure Board for Interpreters and Transliterators was created by Act Number 1998-675 to license and regulate providers of services for the hard of hearing, deaf, and speech disabled. They license and regulate providers of services for the hard of hearing, deaf, and speech disabled. They haven't had any legislative activity since the last sunset review. There are 9 members of this board that are appointed by the governor. They serve 4-year staggered terms. 4 members shall be certified as interpreters or transliterators. There are 3 deaf or hard of hearing members, and there are 2 members at large. Those are the consumer members that are required by statute. There's no specific statutory authority for racial representation on the board, but there are 2 minority members serving. These board members do not receive compensation. They only receive travel expenses and per diem as other state employees. They did have 5 members come to the most recent 2024 board member training. This board also has a contract with Smith Warren Management Services for their administrative services, facilities, and staff. Keith Warren is the executive director. The current contract is for 2 years that began on January 16th of 2024 for $2,500 a month or $30,000 a year. Their legal counsel is provided by the Attorney General's office. Their website had links to online services to request a verification letter, replacement or license permit cards. There were links to the board's rules, regulations, and statutes. There was information related to applications and renewals. The minutes of the board meetings were on the website. All the current board members were listed, and there was also an announcement section. The source of fund is licensure fees. They are housed, their money is kept in the state's treasury. There are no required distributions. The unused funds at the end of each year that are in excess of $250,000 shall be available to provide for education and training of interpreters and transliterators in post-secondary programs. The fund balances at the end of the fiscal years that were covered by the sunset review period did not exceed $250,000. As of May 21st of 2024, they had 306 licensees or permit holders. There's no examination required to obtain a license or a permit for this board's licensees. The licenses and permits are renewed annually, and 95% were completed online in 22 in 2023 and 2024. We did have some licensee demographic information, that's on page 5.
Pro Tem Pringle, you have a question?
Did I hear that correctly? You don't have to pass an examination to be a licensee?
Yes, sir.
So I could just go apply for a license?
You have to submit an application of an affidavit documenting your current validation of a nationally recognized certification that's approved by the board, but you don't actually have to pass a test other than the interpretive code of ethics exam. Their significant issues are on page 6 and 7. The first one is that the board does not always deposit checks and money orders in a timely manner. 42% were deposited from up to 6 to 30 business days after being received by the board. Failure to promptly deposit checks or money orders can increase the risk or loss of misuse. The risk of loss and misuse of state funds. Most of those errors were 10+ days. The second significant issue that we found was dealing with contracts again. Upon the expiration of a contract for administrative services that was secured through a request for bid under the state's old procurement law, the board failed to rebuild the contract and executed multiple emergency contracts during the sunset review period. Additionally, the board allowed contracts to expire before entering into new contracts, thus operating without a contract in place for 4 spans of time during the sunset review period. The first emergency contract was started in July 2021 and went through July 2022. The second one began in August and expired a year later in August. And the third one began September 28th of 2023 and went through December 31st of 2023. Each of these contracts were allowed to lapse, meaning the board operated without a contract in place for periods of time. The board was also paid during these periods of time. In September of 2023, the board completed the RFP process for administrative services. And in November of 2023, they submitted a contract to the contract review committee between the board and Smith Warren Management Services. The contract came through the contract review in December of 2023. It was held, so it was not signed until January 16th. So they operated again without a contract from December 31st to January 16th. But they do currently have a contract in place for $30,000 a year.
Representative Simpson?
Here's my concern with how this stuff is appearing. As this board has grown, and some of the things that you said, and I've read through this, have been concerning. If they can keep $250,000 without that having to go back to the general fund, right? They stay in. So they have this administrative services contract, or the executive director contract, or whatever it is, and he prepares the figures to go through. Or I say he, it's Smith Warren, so whoever it is. As the licenses increase, his fee gets to increase to keep them lower than that $250,000 so that way they don't have to get into the general fund. But if it's the constant of there aren't a ton of investigations, I don't believe. I know the last one didn't have any investigations. But if it's just 2/3, if they just have a blanket of we keep 2/3 and if we need to move it around to do what we can to keep you from $250,000, is that not, I mean, do you see the appearance of problems with that?
The money, they don't have to give it back to the general fund. The $250,000 just has to go for education.
Oh, it has to go for education.
Education training
Okay.
for that. But they only have 10 complaints during the review period, so you're correct about that. And then their financial information shows that their balance at the end, it has grown from $73,000 at the end of fiscal year 2020 on page 13 up to $137,000 at the end of fiscal year 2023. So their expenditures are staying pretty steady. They did have an increase in fiscal year 2022. So, and that appears to be a travel event that will increase more.
But do you know if those contracts increase for the executive director, for the person running through? I know they were RFPs and had to go through the emergency contract, but do we know the amounts of those?
I can find out. I don't have it noted in the report, but we have it.
Okay. If they stayed the same, then I'm completely wrong. But if they went up, then that sends a red flag in my mind.
I'll get you. I'll find
Along those same lines, what are they doing to recruit or train new translators and interpreters? I don't know that I could see that in the financials or in anything that I've read in the report so far.
That's not something that we have in here. Something the board can answer for.
Right, I just asked the board tomorrow. Thank you. Any other members have questions? Yeah, want to share what y'all working on?
Yes, ma'am. Appendix 2, list of professional services by vendor. This is on page 30. And they're listed in there, but I'm not sure that ties directly to the contract that we were discussing with the, what was that, $3,000 a month?
It's $30,000 a year currently. So Smith Warren Management Services was paid under the emergency contracts $1,736.44 per month.
Oh, okay.
In 2023, you'll see the cost go down a little bit, and it was lower because 2 months, August and September, were not paid until the 2024 fiscal year. So it's showing there. So it's not. That's why it's down to 17. But that was the cost per month.
Okay, so that is that number then.
Right.
Okay.
Representative, that's the amount.
All right, does that finish that report? All right, let's move on to the next one if we have no questions. Manufactured housing.
The Manufactured Housing Commission was created by the Alabama legislature in 1985 to provide a comprehensive manufactured housing and building program with respect to construction, transportation, site location, or manufacturing standards for such structures. The mission of the commission is to regulate the manufactured housing industry doing business in Alabama with an emphasis on compliance and consumer protection. The commission serves as the state's regulatory agency to enforce the installation program standards and the manufactured building program and construction standards. Additionally, the commission serves as the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's administrative agency within the state to enforce federal regulations pertaining to manufactured homes. The commission consists of an advisory board of 9 members, an administrator and other staff and personnel. Members of the advisory board are appointed as follows. There are 6 members appointed by the governor and they are subject to Senate confirmation. 3 industry members and 3 consumers. There are 3 governmental representatives. There's 1 local one local government member appointed by the President Pro Tem of the Senate, 1 member by the House, and 1 member by the Senate that is appointed by the Lieutenant Governor. That member is Senator Gudger.
Yeah, Senator Gudger, I just wasn't sure if you're going to announce your conflict on this board. He's on the board, yeah.
You mean grounds for sunset?
Who appointed you, Senator? Was that the Pro Tem? And the other one is Representative Sheena Morris in the House of Representatives. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. I've never seen members of the legislature be members of the boards.
The industry and consumer members of the board serve 5-year terms. The governor appointees, those are the ones that serve the 5-year terms. The ones that are the governmental representatives, like Senator Gudger, they serve their initial terms of office, so it's going to coincide. The 3 members that are supposed to be from the Alabama manufactured housing industry, they should have 2 that are manufacturers and 1 shall represent retailers, and none of them can be an employee of the Alabama Manufactured Housing Association. And then the consumer members, there are 3 of them, and 1 of them is required to live in a manufactured home at the time that they are appointed. So they have 3 consumer members. There's no specific racial representation requirements, but there are 2 minority members serving. The consumer members are supposed to be from certain congressional districts. 1 member must reside in the congressional district 4 or 5, 1 from 3 or 6, and then 1 from 1, 2, or 7. The members of the advisory board commission, except the legislative members, are compensated $100 per day, and then the legislative members are just entitled to their regular legislative compensation. The administrator of the commission is Steve Pinker. He has an annual salary of $142,454. The administrator is appointed by the governor, and the governor sets the qualifications and compensation of the administrator. This commission does own real property. It's on South Decatur Street in Montgomery. They have 23 employees. One of those employees is their general counsel, Dean Hartzog, so he's on staff. The board's website had information such as announcements, meeting notices, and administrative rules and federal regulations were there. There were links to forms and applications for installers, retailers, and manufacturers. They had a lot of good information on their website at the time that we checked. The source of funds is the licensing fees, inspection fees, federal reimbursements, and then fines and penalties. They are within the state treasury. There aren't any required distributions, and they do not have any requirements to do anything with unused funds at the end of the year. They're allowed to keep those. As of September 30th of 2023, they had a total of 1,144 licenses issued. Those were between manufacturers, retailers, salespersons, installers, and then a separate set you'll see for the modular manufacturers, retailers, and inspection agencies. Examinations for these installers are compiled and administered and graded by the commission. Exams are held at training sites, and these are in Atmore, Gardendale, Wetumpka, and Orange Beach, and they're held throughout the year. They reported that they had a 100% pass rate when they gave exams. They have to do exams for installers and for salespeople. These people, they only do renewals online about 35%. I know you guys like to know about that sometimes, so about a third renewal online each year. Otherwise, it's through the mail. They come in, some of them even. Their significant issues start on page 9. The first one is that the commission did not certify deposits to the state treasury within 30 days after deposits were made. For 23% of the deposits were tested. It was from 31 to 99 days. That's a requirement of the state treasurer's office, that those deposits are certified within 30 days. The second issue was that they did not always deposit receipts in a timely manner. And 48% tested were deposited from 6 to 17 business days after receipt. And now, that might not be as bad as a lot of the other ones you see this in, but the commission itself has a policy that they say that they will deposit funds each day. And so if they have a policy like that, we take that into account, that they've decided that that's what they're going to do. The next issue we have is that the commission did not accurately record comp time, annual leave, or sick leave into the state's governmental human resources system, GHRS. That's how state employees leave and everything is kept up with, or it is, it's actually changing now, but it's the program that was in place. We found these when we were reviewing timesheets and testing those, but as soon as we talked to the commission and let them know, they worked with us and they corrected all the balances that were incorrect. The fourth significant issue was that 80% of complaint files selected for review were missing required documentation of a letter being mailed to complainants with information regarding the closure of their complaint and the reason for the closure by the commission. The commission, like I said earlier, is HUD's agency within the state to enforce federal regulations. And the state plan from the Department of Housing and Urban Development says that a consumer is to be mailed a letter stating the date of closure and the reason, and a copy is to be in the complaint file. So that is one reason we really looked for that. The next two significant issues came from the questionnaires. They're on page 10. 29% of the licensees responding to our survey think that some of the commission's laws, rules, or policies are an unnecessary restriction on the practice of their profession. The next issue are things that were brought up by the complainants that were surveyed. 27% of those responding to the survey indicated that receipt of their complaint was not always acknowledged by the commission. When we tested the complaint files, we did not see any issues with this. 82% of the complainants responding to the survey indicated that the commission did not communicate the results of them. We had a significant issue about that. It's the fourth one that I discussed just a minute ago. 82% of the complainants do not think that the commission did everything it could to resolve their complaint. The listing of the employees are on page 12. It shows the different positions and the salaries associated with those. The board, or the commission has 23 employees. The performance characteristics start on page 13, and it shows the annual renewals that are done for each fiscal year. And those numbers, they are having an increase from 2020 to 2023. It's not a big one, but it is a small increase. You can see that their fines and penalties as a percentage of their operating receipts on page 13. It ranges from 1.12% up to 1.88%, so that's a very small percentage. There are inspections associated with this commission. They have to, the commission inspects 100% of the installation and setups of new and used manufactured homes and buildings. They also do some inspections for the modular buildings. They have performed 6,382 inspections in the last fiscal year, 2023. And so if an installer fails an inspection, the installer is provided with a copy of the inspection report and given 30 days to correct the discrepancies. And then they have to certify, say that they have fixed everything, and then the staff will conduct random follow-up inspections to ensure that everything has been corrected. Their complaint data is on pages 15 and 16. During our review period, they had 191 complaints. 187 were resolved within 126 business days on average, and all the ones that were open for more than 1 year were either having continuous repairs being completed or awaiting the resolution of some litigation. Their financial information can be found on pages 17 through 20. If you look on page 20, that is where their schedule of receipts and disbursements is. At the end of fiscal year 2023, their unobligated cash balance at the end of the year was $4,979,538. That has been growing each year of the sunset review period. And then their board members are in the back of the report. I'm sorry, I keep saying board. Yes, it is the advisory board that's for the commission, and it has for all of them live there.
Any questions from the members? I will say that the one thing I was impressed with, I've had some dealings with this board before, on how they inspect all of the installations. I mean, that's a lot of work, and it really does serves the consumers well. Yes, Pro Tem?
They're making all these inspections, do they own cars or vehicles? Because I'm not seeing any.
Yes, sir, they do. If you go to page 12, they have 13 vehicles assigned to their agency.
Representative Simpson?
Yeah.
Then go to you were next.
I was just gonna say, it seems to appear that if boards have sunset members on their board, they do well. It's kind of surprising.
You like giving me a hard time. I want to say that this particular board stays very, very active. If you saw those inspections, there's over 6,000 of them this particular fiscal year. Think about a building inspector. If you're building a house, it's the same thing as going through the process of building someone's home. And sometimes people in rural districts save up their whole life so they can own their own home for the first time in their life. These are being inspected as they're going down this assembly line, being inspected when they're placed on the truck, being inspected when they're installed, and then coming back to make sure that everything is worked perfect so that there's not issues with the consumer. Exactly what you said. This board is crazy, crazy active. And in my head, it's just a larger umbrella, like a building inspector as people go forward. But I think it's very viable. I'm not sure about the significant findings. I'm going to read these tonight, but I did not turn in my board member things. Over the last 3 months, I've been a little occupied with some vertebrae, some rib fractures, but I'm back, but I'll look at this and we'll talk tomorrow. But I think this board's a great board, and I'm proud of the people that are on there and being able to associate with them. And while I'm here, I want to say that in the House District and Senate District, the reason I'm on that board is that it's the #1 district in the state Senate for the most manufactured homes being produced, Marion, Yancey, and Coleman County. And so that's the reason I'm on that board. My Senate district.
Very nice. You represent your district well.
Thank you.
Senator Stewart, did you have a question? Or?
Sure, Madam Chairwoman.
thank you for the recognition, and it's good to be with my colleague, Senator Gudger, here. Just want to share, I'm interested in the results. About 82% thinking the commission didn't do everything they did to resolve the complaint. And I'm interested in knowing, like, where did these complaints come from? Because when we look at the geographical locations on the board, I represent the Black Belt, and there are lots of manufactured homes in the Black Belt, and there's no representation on the board. And I get complaints all the time from constituents about the conditions of their mobile homes. So I'm interested in knowing where the complaints came from and have they been addressed.
Senator Stewart, when the complainants respond to our survey, it is truly anonymous, so that may be a question that the board can help more with.
Well, yeah, able to answer that tomorrow with Steve when we get to the mic. Okay, Chairman.
Yeah, we'll let the board handle that tomorrow. Any other questions on this board? All right, let's move on to the next one. It'll be marriage and family therapy.
The Board of Examiners in Marriage and Family Therapy was created by Act No. 1997-97 to license and regulate the practice of marriage and family therapy. The board is comprised of 5 members appointed by the governor. 3 are practicing marriage and family therapists, 1 marriage and family therapy educator, and 1 public member. The members serve 5-year terms. They are required to have 1 public member, and there's 1 public member serving. That's the consumer member. There is no statutory requirement for racial representation or geographical representation. They do have 1 racial minority member serving on the board. These board members also do not receive compensation. They only receive a travel allowance. This board contracts currently with the Austin Group to provide administrative services. Claire Austin is the president of the Austin Group and serves as the executive director. The current contract actually just expired, so it's not current. It expired September 19th of 2024, and it was for $42,496,000. There was an emergency contract signed for this board by the CPO just this morning to help remedy this. I'll discuss it more in a significant issue. This board did have a previous contract with Smith Warren Management Services. The change in administrative services provider was only last fall. This board does not have employees. They use the Attorney General's Office for legal counsel. Their website contained a listing of board members, current laws, rules and regulations, a roster of licensees, disciplinary actions, meeting minutes, contact information, public records information, and a search feature for their roster. They are within the state's treasury. They do not have any required distributions, and they retain the funds at year end. As of May 15th of 2024, there were 497 licensees at this board. In order to be a licensed marriage and family therapist, you have to complete education requirements that are related to the associate licensed marriage and family therapy associate, and those have to graduate from a regionally accredited university or educational institute with a master's or doctoral program in marriage and family therapy. And we have quite a few of those in the state. The University of Alabama has a graduate program, Auburn has a graduate program, UAB has a graduate program. On the next page, on page 6, we have information about the exams that you have to take in order to become licensed. However, the pass-fail rates were not available by educational institution. The board wasn't able to provide us that.
I might have to interrupt you. Why not?
They said that it is not collected. We weren't given what we asked for.
All right, well, that's going to be a sticky point with me.
It's a national examination that's given. by a professional testing service, and the examination fees are paid straight to them. And it's administered monthly during 1 week periods at testing facilities in Birmingham, Dothan, Huntsville, Mobile, and Montgomery. The board's licensees, their licenses are valid for 2 years, and they have a 93% online renewal percentage. The significant issues for this board, they're on page 8 and 9. The first significant issue has to deal with contracts. Upon the expiration of a contract for administrative and management services secured through a request for bid process, when it expired on September 30th of 2021, the board executed multiple emergency contracts. Additionally, the board operated without a contract in place for 3 periods of time between September of 2021 and September of 2023. The board had entered into 3 emergency contracts with Smith Warren Management Services to provide administrative management facility services beginning September 1st of 2021 and expiring August 3rd, 2023. So their initial contract was for $3,500 a month for 12 months. The second one, it stayed at $3,500 a month. But there was a lapse between those 2 contracts. The third emergency contract stayed at $3,500 per month, and it expired August 3rd of 2023. In July of 2023, the board did complete the RFP process and awarded the contract to the Austin Group. The contract between the board and the Austin Group was submitted to the Contract Review Committee for the August 3rd, 2023 meeting. However, the board's contract with the Austin Group did not contain certain language. And because the board failed to include all required language, the contract had to be resubmitted and signed by the governor. It delayed its effective date. So on October 23rd, 2023, the CPO granted another emergency contract to get them through this process of getting the contract signed. The contract with the corrected language was re-executed by the board and the Austin Group, resubmitted to the Contract Review Committee at the September 2023 meeting. The contract was for a 12-month period from the date of the governor's signature, which was on September 20th of 2023, which means it expired September 19th of 2024. So for a third time, the board operated without a contract from September 8th to September 19th. The contract with the Austin Group that had been signed by the governor in September 2023 contained a renewal option. However, this option was not exercised by the board. So the board's going to have to resolicit administrative services through an RFP process. I did speak with the CPO this morning, and she did sign an emergency contract while they are working through the RFP process again. With the Austin Group. It changed when they did the RFP process in July 2023, that's when it changed from Smith Warren to the Austin Group, and that contract was signed in September 2023, that's when it changed over.
You'll be able to get us the answer that Representative Underwood talked about, the emergency contracts and what that means, and just kind of a simple explanation for the use of emergency contracts with us tomorrow.
I can actually let Jason Paul give you to you now, if that's okay.
Sure. I don't want to put him on the spot.
So to answer your question, Representative, the criteria under the new procurement law beginning October 1 of 2022 forward is that the emergency for a professional service contract like we're dealing with here with either Smith Warren or the other agencies is that it has to be affecting the public health, the public safety, or public welfare of the state. And that has to be declared in writing to the Chief Procurement Officer. And those contracts can only be entered into now under the procurement law for a 1-year period is the maximum on that. And so those are the criteria for public health, public safety, or public welfare. She's the sole decider of that to either grant it or deny it. Christine Cook is now the Chief Procurement Officer.
Okay, so she's the sole decider of whether or not that meets the 3 criteria.
That's correct.
I don't know, it just seems like a lot of these same groups that have multiple representation are doing the same thing with these emergency contracts. And I'm not saying that marriage and family therapy is not a great board or a great cause, I don't know that it's an emergency for public health that we have all these exceptions for these groups to come through and continuously not do the RFP process and or get around it with these emergency contracts. Does that make any, am I speaking, does that make sense?
It is. I mean, when you look at this for public health, public safety, you're typically dealing with things that are outside factors that are beyond the control of the board. But I understand what you're saying. If you don't do what you're supposed to do and you cause the emergency, I don't know how the CPO looks at that, but certainly I would look at an external factor of something happening that caused a public health or public safety issue beyond the board's control versus we just didn't go through the process that we were supposed to go through, and now we'll have an emergency. She's trying to weigh what they've done or haven't done versus the continuation of the board and the service that it gives to the people it regulates.
So, just to play that out, if an entity continues operations and continues to receive payments without a contract, it expired on September of 23, and they received payments for 3 months before another one was finalized. Is there illegalities to that? What's the exposure there to either the state or the board or otherwise if they continued until another one started? I don't know how serious it is for it to expire and another one to begin. But there's got to be something because everybody's jumping through the hoops of the emergency contract. So I'm just wondering, I'm trying to get a bookend about how serious that is to let it expire and continue to pay. And I've seen some of those that said they received to get some, continue to receive some. So I'm just wondering the seriousness of that as it relates to the state.
Representative Underwood, I think it's serious because a vendor should not be performing services when there's not a contract in place. As far as how those payments go through or are caught, by the comptroller's office would vary, but you have what's called the Board of Adjustment, and so in certain situations, some of those claims may be paid while they may not legally, as far as the court is determined, have to be paid. They may be submitted to the Board of Adjustment, and they would be looked at, by the board. But we certainly think that it's a significant issue if you're operating without a contract.
Sure.
So if you're operating without a contract and to be an executive director, I do think that there is some legal issues there for making decisions for a board and acting when you are not, in fact, that executive director. I think that there could be some issues because in some instances for these boards, that executive director makes decisions depending on the statutes and stuff. So I do think there's some exposure for sure there.
So it's not just about the money itself, it's about the designation of, I have the title of making these decisions and working for the board, and that's what you're talking about.
That's more of my concern than there's a mechanism in state government and the board adjustments for payments. It's more of the concern that there's not.
That makes sense.
Ms. Riddle, so when we hear emergency contracts, the word emergency is alarming. I understand what you're saying is for the continuation of services for legal issues and other things like that you have to enter into an emergency contract to extend those things. When you know that contract's coming to an end, with these various boards, and it seems like especially it seems to be critical from one particular one or one particular agency that administers these. When you know that contract's coming up for renewal, like we have to do in the private sector, you know a contract's ending, you go ahead and do your request of proposal so that you don't have a lapse. What is the issue with that continuing on, or are there multiple issues with that?
With what continuing on, I'm sorry?
Well,
this continuing to happen?
Right, where you don't have when one contract ends another one without it entering into emergency status.
Well, I think that there's no contract there, so if something happened and there's...
That's kind of my point. They know that the contract is ending, so why isn't there another bid process with the contracts in place for whatever?
It doesn't make sense to me personally or financially, because if you're wanting to get paid, it takes planning out in government to get contracts through, to go through RFP process, to get through legislative contract review, to get to the governor's office. You have to very much plan in advance, and it's something we have preached until we're blue in the face about, but the lack of planning, is that an emergency?
Thank you. You just confirmed my concern for the inability to properly conduct business. Thank you.
I don't know if I meant to do that, but you're welcome.
I'm gonna segue on a board vacancy, that they got the chairman of the board is coming up. Some of their prior findings was that they didn't properly plan for their board vacancies, so, they got a vacancy coming up in December. I know they don't have to post it for 45 days, but I'm certainly sure that Representative Simpson is interested to see if they're recruiting down in South Alabama.
I've learned so many people think Montgomery is South Alabama.
All right, Representative Shedd, you want to be recognized?
Well, we've been talking about emergency contractors since I remember, so I just think it's time for this committee to make recommendations when it comes to the end of when we have our business meeting and make recommendations. It's time that we do something to properly address this, to make sure it gets fixed this time.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman?
Yes, you're recognized.
I'd like to go, thank you for the recognition, I would like to go one step further than Representative Shedd, and I believe in everything you just said. If you are an expert in your field, right, for example, I build doors out of old wood. If anybody wants to know anything about building a door out of old wood, come see me because I know what I'm doing, right? If this third-party contracts are out there, to what you're saying, we expect that all of these boards, if they're under emergency contracts, and there's time and a place for emergency contracts, but year after year after year after year is what the redundancy that I'm hearing from this board that we're tired of. Is that correct, ladies and gentlemen? Now, having said that, if you are going to be an expert in that field, whatever it might be, which in this particular field is executive directors of these boards, this particular board I'm hearing is going to hold you to a higher standard because this is what you do for a living. And this is how you make your money. So vacancies on the board, and making sure you turn your stuff in on time, making sure that you're able to get your contracts in order is something that I think this board should just seriously look at as we go into the future. And again, it's too late for the ones that are in front of us right now, but I do think that it's something that we're all looking at and paying attention to, and it's because we're trying to hold them to a higher standard than other people, and because that's what they do for a full-time job. Thank you.
Kelly?
To kind of piggyback on that, looking at this particular board, one of their board members' major concerns was, and I quote, the most significant issue is the bill for the Senate attempting to combine boards. And there was a couple of those comments in there. The whole purpose for that is exactly what we're talking about with these emergency contracts. The notices you've got coming up whenever a board's going to be vacancy, going through the processes, that's basic policy and procedures work. That's not something that catches you off guard. There are times when it does, but not the volume that we're seeing here. So the board members are right to be concerned about legislating because that's our job, is to fix those things whenever they're habitually coming before us. Thank you, Madam Chair.
If I could piggyback on your comments, the other intention that the majority of this board announced at the beginning of the quadrennial was the red tape reduction and making sure that we were removing all obstacles for people to work in the state of Alabama. So with that given, that's also some of the things that I'm looking for at this board. Not worried about the board position, but worried about what are they doing to make sure that we get more people in the field doing the job that needs to be done. So did you need to be recognized?
Like always.
Any other questions from the member? Oh, Senator Stewart?
Madam Chairwoman, thank you. And this may be a question for tomorrow, but I read one of the respondents said there aren't enough of us to meet the needs of our communities regarding the profession. And I know the legislature, we passed a bill last year dealing with MSW degree graduates. I think that was Rep. Hope Jones, and Senator Coleman Madison passed the bill to expand the scope of what MSWs could perform, Master of Social Work degree holders. And so I wanted to know, would that remedy provide a remedy to the shortage? And that may be a question for tomorrow.
Okay, yeah, make a note of that, let's hit that with the board tomorrow, please. Have you finished your run through, Dixie?
No, ma'am.
All right, continue on, please.
The second significant issue was that the board did not post vacancy notices 45 days prior to the expiration of board members' terms. The third one you all have touched on, that 50% of the board members responding to our survey thought the most significant issue facing the board is the legislation attempting to combine the boards. And then we also noted that 33% of licensees that responded indicated that they think some of the rules and laws or policies are unnecessary to their profession. And 29% indicated that they are not adequately informed of changes to an interpretation to the board's positions, policies, rules, and laws.
Could I get your staff to research, is it an insurance requirement while we created this board? And, you know, is that the reason why they have to have certification in order to bill insurance? I'd like more information about that.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
If we keep going through the report, you can see on page 11 the licensee numbers that are for the last 4 calendar years. They're staying pretty steady from 445 up to 486, around 463. They only assessed fines and penalties in fiscal year 2023. It was $1,000, which is 1% of their operating receipts. They had 16 complaints submitted to the board. 13 of those have been resolved. They were resolved in 104 business days on average. Their financial information can be found on page 16. Their ending unobligated cash balance at September 30th, 2023 was $91,508.55. You can see that there has been an increase due in their fees that they collected. It was due to the passage of Act 2022-238 in response to a previous finding for the Marriage and Family Therapy Board collecting fees that were not authorized. So they had some legislation done that authorized those fees, and they began collecting, and they stopped for a little bit because they were told that they weren't authorized. The board members are listed in the back of the report, and the board's response is back there also.
Any questions from the members?
I mean,
Go ahead.
2 from Jefferson County, 2 from Marshall County, 1 from Montgomery County. I guess what Montgomery is South Alabama, is what we're looking at.
Nothing is not consistent. Any other questions from the members? All right, let's move on to the next board. Physical therapy.
Yes, ma'am. The next board that we have is the Board of Physical Therapy. It was established by Act number 1965-476 to pass upon the qualifications of applicants for registration as physical therapists and licensing as physical therapist assistants, to conduct examinations of the applicants for licensure, and to issue the licenses and renewals for these people. They had some legislation in this past session in 2024. It's not been codified yet, but it is included in your report in the back, and this was to require minimum education requirements to specify acts that a physical therapist is prohibited from performing, and to prohibit physical therapists from referring to themselves as a physician, among other things. This act was effective June 1st of 2024. This board consists of 7 members appointed by the governor. 4 shall be physical therapists, 2 are physical therapist assistants, and there's 1 consumer member required, and there is 1 consumer member serving. The members serve 5-year staggered terms. There is no specific statutory requirement for racial representation, but there are no minority members currently serving on this board. There are some geographical requirements for the board members. 4 physical therapists shall be nominated from the congressional districts. Physical therapist assistant members shall be nominated from the northern and southern areas of the state. Whenever possible, a congressional district shall not be represented by 2 physical therapists. Currently, districts 1, 2, 5, and 6 are represented. And they do have the physical therapist assistant, 1 from the northern section of the state and 1 from the southern section of the state. These board members are compensated $250 a day plus travel expenses. Their administrator is Kathy Miller. She has a current annual salary of $91,269.60. That is set by the board. She is appointed by the board. This board has 4 employees. They use the Attorney General's office for legal services. Their website contains information about the board, the minutes of meetings, has news, links to statutes and rules, licensing information, renewal information, and information regarding the complaint process. This board's funds are held in the state's treasury. There are no required distributions, and unused funds are retained by the board at the end of the year.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
I don't know if it's stopping you here. I'm sorry. I spoke at it, Madam Chair. No. I'm on page 14. 14, and I need my accountant friend to help me out with this. This is why I went to law school because I was told they were beating on that. The way that I look at this is their disbursements total. If you look at 2019 to 2020, it's 411,000. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
395,000 in 2020 to 2021. 424,000 in 2021 to 2022, and 400,997 in 2022 to 2023. Cash balance, their cash balance at the end of the year for this past year is $2.3 million. So they have roughly over help me out here, that's almost 5 years of their total disbursements that they just have sitting in a cash balance through there. Is that normal that you have? I understand saving for a rainy day, but you're saving for 6 years of no income coming in?
Right there, the statutes don't require them to do anything with the funds. They can hold them.
That just seems excessive to me.
Or you want to carry that bill in the house?
I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. We're just charging fees and charging all this stuff just so that this board has 6 years of making sure nothing changes for 6 years with no income and they're good. That's a problem with raising. Maybe they need to drop their fees for a little bit. Maybe we can ask the board some of these questions.
Mr. Chairman, and thinking about through that too, and disbursement back of funds to the licensees, education and continuing education, conferences to go to, things like that should be paid for that if they have something that exceeds what they need for each year that's in their reserves. But getting back to the licensees, they're the ones that put the money in there, is something that we need to look at all around every board.
And also what programs they have to rehabilitate any members that should need such rehabilitation instead of losing them from the marketplace, if they are rehabilitatable. Yes, sir, Mr. Underwood, Representative.
So to just to reiterate what Representative Simpson saying is money's held in reserve means money's not circulated. That means money's taken out of individuals or small businesses that's being held in Montgomery as opposed to circulating, which is where it starts to grow. It'll cycle and produce more as it's in circulation. But to hold it is not the right thing to do, and that's something that this group has been good about watching over from the day we started this new committee 2 years ago. And it might not be a bad idea at some point in time to say the maximum reserves will be so much of your annual expenses, and hold that across the board for them all. And after that, it's either rebate back to the licensees or invest it back into the profession somehow through education, but just cap them and say you can't go above a certain amount, because this is not helping the profession or the state just to hold them in Montgomery.
Yes, sir, Representative Shedd.
Well, I've made this point before, so I'll do it again now, but we have to be careful. I agree with what everything's been said, but we have to be careful whatever adjustment we will do legislatively or whatever way we do it, that we don't cause these boards to go on a big spending spree in September. So that happens a lot of times.
Well, and I'd like to see, like I said, on the pass-fail rate, they've done a very good job of outlining what schools and what their percentage pass was. And there's just one or a couple that are struggling that could utilize a little extra effort to make sure that their programs are bolstered by some of these funds that are sitting in reserve. They can do things to help those institutions, in my opinion. Any further questions? you continue on with the board?
Yes, ma'am. So as of August 9th, 2024, the board had a total of 6,870 licensees between physical therapists and physical therapy assistants. We talk about the examinations on page 6 of this report, and then there's detailed information by educational institution, starting on page 62 in the back of your report. We seem to have pretty good percentage passing rates overall. Any licenses expire annually. They do all of their renewals online. There were no new significant issues apart from those that arose from questionnaires. And those, the issues that were there, was just from questionnaires. There were 8 responses from 7 board members. I know that those numbers sound wrong, but 8 people responded to our survey, even though there's only 7. Somebody responded twice. 4 indicated that the most significant issues are initiating a physical therapy compact with new direct access that was enabled by Act Number 2024-385, and 3 of the 8 responses, 38%, think that the most significant issue is the threat of regulatory board consolidation by the Alabama Senate. They did have 1 prior finding that was unresolved, and it had to do with notifying the Secretary of State of vacancies occurring because of the expiration of board members' terms. They did not get that done within the 45 days of a term expiration, so they need to sort of issues with that. The employees are shown on page 9. Their classifications, they only have 4. As I said before, their legal services are handled by the Attorney General's office. You'll see on page 10 that they have licensees that have been around 6,000 for each year. There are not numbers broken out between physical therapists and physical therapy assistants. The prior executive director, we were told, didn't record those details, but it is being done now and it's being recorded in the minutes, and it shouldn't be an issue in the future. That's why you don't see those. You'll see their fines as a percentage of their operating receipts on page 10. It ranges from 1% up to 3.2%. The board had 58 complaints that they received during the review period, and they resolved all 58 in an average of 57 days. Their financial information we've already touched on, but it can be found on page 14. That's their schedule of receipts and disbursements. They, like Representative Simpson pointed out, they have a $2.2 million balance at the end of September 30th of 2023. I will say that you'll see that there is a drop. In 2019 and 2020, they didn't have a lot of revenue coming in, and that was because the renewal fees had been reduced from $130 down to $93 for physical therapists and to $10 for physical therapy assistants. So there was less revenue collected. This was done by an emergency rule. It was related to COVID, and then they were reinstated later. That's why you see the revenues go back up. The professional services and the exam results are in the back of the report, appendices 3 and 4. They are on page 61. That's where they start. And then the board members are following the exam results. They did not list the cities on this letter, but I have those noted. The southern representative for the physical therapy assistant is from Montgomery, and the northern one is from Sylacauga. And then they have representatives from Theodore, Montgomery, Huntsville, Alabaster, and Mount Olive.
They had a Theodore representative?
Yes, ma'am.
Which one?
Robert Fleming.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from the members? Theodore's my district, so you know that. Just I've never heard of one of these from being from Theodore. I've heard of Mobile, but not Theodore often. All right, if that completes your report and we have no questions, we'll move on to the next one, which would be nursing home administrators.
Yes, ma'am. The Board of Examiners of Nursing Home Administrators was created by Act, enacted in 1969 in response to Section 1908 of the Federal Social Security Act. This Federal Social Security Act section requires that states adopt a program for licensing administrators of nursing homes and provides that no nursing home within any state will operate except under the supervision of a licensed administrator. Federal code regulations also require that the state's Medicare plan must include a state program for licensing nursing home administrators as a condition of participation in Medicare and Medicaid programs. The board is authorized to license and regulate the profession of nursing home administrators. It does not regulate nursing homes. Nursing homes are licensed and regulated by the Alabama Department of Public Health. The board is closely associated with the Alabama Nursing Home Association. Part of the board's statutes make the governing body of the association an advisory council to the board. The board leases office space from the association, and the board's executive secretary is also an employee of the association. This board is comprised of 7 members that are appointed by the governor, 3 nursing home administrators, 1 licensed physician, a hospital administrator, 1 licensed registered nurse, and there's 1 consumer member. The consumer member has not been represented on the board since 2017. We do have a significant issue related to that, so we do not have that member represented. The members serve 3-year terms, and they receive compensation of $100 a day. There is no statutory requirement for racial representation, but they do have 1 black member currently serving. The geographical representation requirements are that not more than 1 board member can be from any congressional district. They're not supposed to serve at the same time. Their administrator is Katrina Magden. She's the board's executive secretary.
Let me interrupt you for a question.
I'm gonna interrupt you real quick on that one, because as you've seen, I've had a theme this year.
I have notes for you.
Some of this, like this requirement has a geographical representation requirement. They're required by a congressional district, and we actually have representation from congressional district on this board. Is this something that the Sunset Committee does when we say we want to require geographic representation, or is this something that requires a law change to require geographic representation, or why do some boards must have congressional district representation and some boards don't?
Some boards are specifically written into their statute that it is how the board should be comprised.
So that's us?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I noticed the consumer is not filled.
That's correct.
That's gotta be kinda hard to fill. If you're a consumer of a nursing home, then you need nursing home support services. I just don't know how they would ever solve that problem.
The qualifications for the consumer member is just that the consumer member, their spouse, or their immediate family shall not be a licensee of the board or employed in a nursing home profession.
But they have to have a family member in a nursing home. It doesn't have to be the person that's in the nursing home.
Right, it doesn't specify anything other than those things.
Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, but I'd be interested, did they mention why that hasn't been filled since 2019? That's 5 years.
They've said that they've worked on it and they've tried, but they haven't been able to get it filled by the government.
Right, well, when I thought it had to be the resident of the nursing home, I was sympathetic, but now that I hear that it's a lot broader than that, that's gonna be something we're gonna need to find out more about.
Okay. Katrina Magden serves part-time as the board's executive secretary and also works part-time for the Alabama Nursing Home Association. Her salary from the board is set by the board and is currently $41,946.24 annually. She's the board's only employee. The board's legal counsel is provided by the Attorney General's office. The board's website contains current statutes, minutes of board meetings, course approvals, licensing information, qualifications, fee schedule, contact information. The board's funds are held in the state's treasury. There are no required distributions, and the fund balances are retained at fiscal year end. As of May 6th, they had 553 licensees. They do have to pass the examination. Examinations are prepared by the National Association of Boards of Long-Term Care Administrators. They offer a 2-part national exam for nursing home administration, and core is a state and 1 state exam. The national examinations are administered throughout the state, and exam fees are paid directly to the testing centers. So we have the national examination results for the 2 national examinations, and then we have the state examination results also.
remind me again, how do they train for this exam?
So in order to be a nursing home administrator, the education requirements are to be a high school graduate and has completed a program or a program equivalent to having a high school education. And they have to complete educational requirements as prescribed by the board. So they don't have to have a college degree in a certain thing in order to sit for the examination or anything like that.
Okay. And so they just basically take it on common sense and their knowledge of the industry.
I'm not sure exactly of all the requirements, but I can get you some more information on what's on the exam.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, because if it's a free market and you're good at it, I'm all for that, but I noticed they kind of struggled in 2023 on one of the national exams. But go ahead with your report, thank you.
Renewals are done annually for licensees, but online renewals are not available. They do have continuing education requirements each year they have to do, and a lot of those are put on. The board helps arrange a lot of that. We do have some significant issues that start on page 7. The board did not always deposit checks and money orders in a timely manner. 36% of the checks and money orders examined were not deposited from up to 6 to 22 days after being received by the board. Most of those were 10 plus days, the errors that we found. The next issue has to deal with disbursements resulting from inset travel claims. We reviewed these during the review period, and our testing revealed that 9 of the travel claims submitted by a board member showed that the mileage claimed for traveling as in their capacity as a board member was overstated by 459 miles. Upon inquiry regarding the discrepancies found in the sample, the board's executive secretary requested and received repayment of this overclaimed miles from the board member. The next significant issue is that the composition of the board does not comply with the board's statutes. Currently, the board has 2 members appointed from Congressional District 1 and 2 members appointed from Congressional District 3. There is no representation on the board from Congressional Districts 4 and 7. And additionally, the board does not have a consumer member as required, and this position has been vacant since 2017. The next 2 issues arose from the questionnaires or surveys that were sent out. So 50% of the board members that responded to our survey, which was just 2 of 4, they stated that the consolidation by the legislature is the most significant issue facing the board, and 75% of those responding to our survey for nursing home administrators indicated that challenges regarding staffing of nursing homes is the most significant issue facing the profession. On page 10, we have some performance characteristics for you. In 2020, the board had 486 licensees. In 2023, they had 461. There were no fines or penalties assessed by the board during the sunset review period. They received 25 complaints and 25 complaints were resolved. The majority of the complaints are sent in by the Department of Public Health Division of Healthcare Facilities. The Department of Public Health is required to forward any instances of facilities that have deficiencies involving substandard quality of care or immediate jeopardy to the board. The complaints that involve the deficiencies noted during health inspections of the facility accounted for 88% of those complaints that were received by the board, so most of them are coming from public health. The financial information for the board is on pages 13 and 14. At the end of fiscal year 2023, the unobligated cash balance was $674,000. The appendix in the back for professional services is on page 31. They only have $3,000 to $6,000 worth of professional services over the sunset review period. They don't have a lot. The board members are following that. 4 of the 6 members serving are serving expired terms. The statutes do say that members shall serve until their successor is appointed, and the board was able to show us that they have made efforts to get the expired members' terms, someone else either reappointed or put into those positions, and they have made some efforts to get the consumer member appointed. That's all I have.
Any questions from the members? All right, if not, let's move on to the next board, which would be nursing.
The Board of Nursing was created by Act 1965-867 to provide for the regulation and approval of schools of nursing for the examination and licensing of professional and practical nurses. There's a joint committee of the Board of Nursing and the Board of State Medical Examiners for Advanced Practice Nurses that was established to implement a collaborative agreement regarding advanced nursing practice. All applicants for approval to practice as certified registered nurse practitioners or certified nurse midwives are renewed and approved by the joint committee of the Board of Nursing and the State Board of Medical Examiners for Advanced Practice Nurses prior to licensure by the Board of Nursing. We work with some other boards. They do have some recent legislation that was passed in 2024. Those acts are in the back of your report. That's why it is so thick, but we want to give those to you since they're not codified yet. They had an act that authorized the board by rule to provide standards for the scope of practice of certified nursing support technicians and to issue permits to eligible applicants. They revised the membership of the board. This doesn't take effect until October 1. And then, of course, this board was asked to oversee the creation of the new Alabama Massage Therapy Licensing Board. They provide temporary oversight. This board is comprised of 13 members that are appointed by the governor. 8 members of the board shall be licensed professional nurses. 4 members of the board shall be licensed practical nurses, and there's 1 consumer member required. They serve 4-year terms. There is 1 consumer member required and 1 consumer member serving. There's no statutory requirements for racial representation, but there are 5 minority members currently serving. There's no geographical representation requirements on this board. Board members are paid $300 a day plus travel. The administrator of this board is Peggy Benson. She's appointed by the board with a current annual salary of $177,892.80 that is set by the board. The board does not own the property. They have 65 employees. For their legal counsel, that is on page 6, they have 3 individuals that are employed by the board. They also have a contracted hearing officer and a contracted general attorney, and there is an attorney general representative assigned to them for collection matters for scholarships and loans. Their website has the board statutes, meeting dates, discipline, renewal, nursing practice information, a licensing search tool. There's information on the board members, their fee schedules, forms, and contact information. This board's funds are held in the state's treasury. They have 2 funds, an operating account, and then a fund for their scholarships and loans. There are no required distributions, and the balances are retained at year end. As of July 30th of 2024, there were 112,942 licensees of this board, and that is over RNs, LPNs, and in the advanced practice, the certified registered nurse practitioners, certified midwives, certified nurse anesthetist, the specialists, and then the student nurse apprentices. There are required examinations to receive to become an RN and to become an LPN. Those examinations are prepared by the National Council of State Boards of Nursing and administered through Pearson VUE on a nationwide basis. Exams are offered in Alabama daily at testing centers that are located in Birmingham, Dothan, Decatur, Mobile, and Montgomery. The examination fees are paid directly to the examination company. The pass-fail rates overall are summarized here for the state, but they're included in the back by educational institution.
Can I interrupt on that? So they've got, do you have comparisons of how many nurses were licensed in prior years? Because on this one, I'm only looking at what they've got now. But it looks like we've got an increasing number of nurses taking the test.
Yes, ma'am. On page 17, there is a listing of the number of licenses and permits that were issued for the past 4 years. And so you'll actually see a decrease in RNs, and it's pretty steady in LPNs, but the nursing compact that went into effect affected that. It became easier for nurses to practice in the state, and so they didn't have as many registered with Alabama. They could still practice here through the compact. So, but that is included on page 17, so there has actually been a decrease from 2020 to 2023.
Okay, thank you, that's exactly page 17, what I was looking for, I appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. Licenses are renewed biannually and 100% are done online. We did get some licensee demographics, they're on page 12. I would say that this is from a voluntary workforce survey that the board does. It's done every 2 years, so we don't have the results from the one that would be now yet, but this is from 21-22. This board did not have any new significant issues other than things that arose from questionnaires. Those are on page 13. So 6 of the 13 board members responded to our survey. 33% expressed concerns about the shortage of nurses. 33 of the board members expressed, that responded to our survey expressed concerns about the Board of Nursing taking over the Board of Massage Therapy. 33% of the board do not think that the board is adequately funded. One of these board members specifically said it because they took over the operations of the Alabama Board of Massage Therapy. For the registered nurses, the RNs, and the licensed practical nurses, the LPN licensees who responded to our survey, 45% of the registered nurses and 44% of the licensed practical nurses, the LPN, indicated that a shortage of nurses was the most significant issue that faced their profession. 25% of registered nurses and 69% of licensed practical nurses indicated that they're not adequately informed of changes to and interpretations of the board's policies, positions, rules, and law. 30% of registered nurses think that some of the board's laws, rules, or policies are unnecessary. Restrictions on the profession, 35% of registered nurses do not think that the mandatory continuing education is necessary, and 31% of the licensed practical nurses indicated that the rate of pay was the most significant issue facing the profession. Our third significant issue, again arising from the questionnaires, was from complainants. 38% of the complainants stated that the board did not communicate the results of its investigation into their complaint to them. However, our review of a sample of the board's complaint files showed that letters of resolution were being sent to complainants. And 62% of complainants do not think the board did everything it could do to resolve their complaint. On page 15, we have a list of employees or the positions that are there and salary ranges. I will say that the report that I sent to you guys had an error in who was assigned to which vehicles. It is corrected in our printed, published public report. If you'd like me to give you those corrected numbers, I can. They still have 13 vehicles assigned throughout the staff. We just got off on the line a little bit. On page 16, we talk about the different contracts with legal counsel. Like I said, they have 3 in-house attorneys that contract for a hearing officer. They have a 2-year contract for that. They contract for to provide advice, counsel, and representation, so kind of general legal advice to the board and its members and employees related to board governance, enforcement actions. They have a 2-year contract with an outside attorney for that. They have a second contract with that same attorney for specific litigation. And then they utilize the Attorney General's office to provide services for collection matters on scholarships and loans. On page 17, we have some performance characteristics, including the number of licensees for the past 4 fiscal years. And we also have the fines and penalties as a percentage of operating receipts, which is less than 2% each year of the review period. The board received 4,783 complaints over the review period. They resolved those in an average of 86 business days, and all have been resolved. Their financial information starts on page 20. Their fee schedule is on 21 through 23. And then on page 24, we have their schedule of receipts, disbursements, and balances. Their unobligated cash balance at the end of fiscal year 2023 was $200,216.53.
So, continuing the theme, it grew from 4.7 to $10.2 million in reserves, and again, that's money. City still in Montgomery. I do appreciate what Representative Shedd said about the caution on that. I just want to point out that if it continues to grow in another 10 years, it'll be another 11 or 12 million on top of that. So, some point in time, you know, I want to see a plan for what they want to do with the reserves and not just let it blindly grow to whatever number it grows to. I did notice on page 26, which I know you probably, that they do receive budgeted money from the Education Trust Fund to be used for scholarships and graduate education, and it's to the tune of plus $600,000 per year, which is dispersed in full. And I do like how this board's operating. I'm not talking about how they operate. They've done a fantastic job of operations, but I just, with that fund being so large, I just want to point that out that at some point in time, I want to know what they plan to do with those monies, or us help them with a plan of what they want to do with it.
And if I can piggyback onto that, I do need to understand, you're saying, does this come as a direct appropriation, this grant and money in education?
Yes. I understand, yes.
Is there anything prohibiting them from, you know, since there is a well-known shortage of nursing that proves out in this report, what are they doing? If, you know, they've got $10 million. What are they doing to recruit more nurses? Or what are they doing for their nurses? So if you'll look and see if they transferred any money in the past to that on their own.
Okay. Yes, and they have it in the last 4 years. All the monies have come straight from the Education Trust Fund.
Okay, thank you. I'll save that for the board. Any other questions from the members? Simpson, you're recognized.
I love every part of the state of Alabama. You know, I love every part. I just want to bring to the members' attention, and everybody listening, there are more people on this board from the city of Ralph, Alabama than there are from Congressional District 1. Me too, and I went to school in Tuscaloosa, but to not, we're like shouting from the rooftops, don't forget us, don't forget us, don't forget us. And when you have two people from Ralph and one person from Mobile and everywhere else, I mean, it's just one person from Congressional District 1, that bothers me.
Montgomery, well, I see it. Montgomery's too, Congressional District 2, isn't it? Because, I mean, that can also incorporate Mobile.
Montgomery's Congressional District 2. So technically, it may not even be anybody from Congressional District 1.
Yes, sir, you're recognized, Mr. Schiff.
Well, I say the same thing about this as I said about the emergency contract. We've been talking about this for a long time, so it's time we do something about this session, and I'm willing to help.
Any other members?
We need to make sure rural Alabama is looked at in that.
Yes, sir. Any other members' questions? One more, I'm sorry.
I always appreciate the pass-fail rate information that we get. Do we have do we have a mechanism for letting the community college system, chancellor's office, know the good and the bad of their institution?
Well, we have, the question was, do we have a mechanism for letting the community college system know the pass-fail rate? So what our first, good and bad, right. So, Mary Ruth and I were working on that just last week, that when the intern comes for the year, they're gonna go through and do not just this year's groups, but for this whole quadrennium, and make sure that we give, the Education Trust Fund, committee members a copy of it. And then, but we can also send it to each of the colleges. The chancellor, okay, yes, sir. But we're gonna have an intern work on that when they get here. I think it's a meaningful report. We wanna make sure that they have it. And we strive to have it the week before they do their budget meetings. So we thought that would be a timely arrival of that report.
It's tracked, because I know for a fact that two-year college lost their accreditation in the nursing field, because so many of their students are failing. So I know it's tracked, we don't have it in front of us.
Senator Gudger, were you seeking recognition?
I was, but I was going to do it tomorrow, but I'll go into it now if it's okay with you, Ms. Chairman. And I just wanted to say direct thank you to Peggy and Honor for stepping in when the legislature needed you to on the massage therapy for last year. we needed somebody with high standard, quality, integrity, and everything that y'all did to get us to where we are now. We haven't sunset a board in 15, 20 years until last year, and so I just wanted to say thank you for doing what you were doing last year to help us out to get the licensees what they needed throughout this whole state. So just a personal thank you. I know we worked hand in hand on that one for a while, so thank you directly from me.
And Senator Gudger, it's appropriate to thank him today, and it's appropriate to thank him tomorrow, because that is a yeoman's task, so we appreciate y'all doing that. All right, have you completed this report, or would you like to continue?
I don't have anything further.
Any other recognition from the members? All right, next report, please, ma'am. Medical examiners, that will be our final report for today.
The State Board of Medical Examiners was created by acts back in 1876 and 1877 to regulate the practice of medicine in the state. The Board of Censors of the Medical Association of the State of Alabama is constituted as the State Board of Medical Examiners. And the Medical Association, MASA, is a professional association of physicians in Alabama. The Medical Licensure Commission was created by Act Number 1981-218. The Medical Licensure Commission has the exclusive power and authority to issue, revoke, and reinstate all licenses authorizing the license to practice medicine or osteopathy in the state. The board and the commission work together in a unique system for the regulation of medical and osteopathic practitioners in the state. The board certifies that applicants meet statutory requirements for licensure, they investigate complaints, and initiate formal actions against licensed physicians. The commission grants medical and osteopathic licenses and adjudicates formal allegations concerning physician safety. Ultimately, the commission has the sole authority to issue medical licenses in Alabama. Act number 1998-604 vested the board with authority to regulate the practices of physician assistants and anesthesiologist assistants. They have the joint committee I talked about with the Board of Nursing to regulate all areas of advanced practice nursing and collaborative practices between licensed physicians and certified registered nurse practitioners, certified nurse midwives. They also have acts that authorize the Board of Pharmacy and a physician licensed by the Medical Licensure Commission to issue collaborative practice agreements. They had some recent legislation passed in 2024. Those are included in the back of the report because they are not codified yet. Act 2024-300 was done to define and expedite the license for the purposes of a criminal background check for applicants, and Act 2024-414 related to off-label medical treatment to prohibit the board and commission of Alabama Licensure Commission from taking adverse action against a physician who prescribes or recommends off-label medical treatments. Both of those are in Appendix 2 of this report. So the members of the State Board of Medical Examiners consist of the members of the Board of Censors of the Medical Association of Alabama. The Board of Censors is composed of 16 members, including 12 censors, and the president, president-elect, immediate past president, and the vice president of the association. 7 censors are elected from each of the state's congressional districts, with the remaining 5 members elected from the state at large. The Medical Licensure Commission has 8 members, and the membership is composed of 7 physicians who shall be appointed as follows. 2 are appointed by the Lieutenant Governor, 2 physicians appointed by the Speaker of the House, and 3 physicians appointed by the Governor. There's additionally 1 public member that is appointed by the Governor. Members of the board, the censors are elected for 3-year terms, and members of the commission serve 5-year staggered terms. There is no statutory requirement for consumer representation on the board. There is a requirement for 1 public member on the Licensure Commission, and there is 1 public member serving. There is no statutory requirement for racial representation on the board or the commission. The board has 4 minority race members serving, and the commission has 2 minority race members serving. The geographical requirements are that there are no statutory requirements for either one. The MASA Constitution and bylaws require that for the State Board of Medical Examiners that 1 member is supposed to be from each of the U.S. congressional districts in the state. So they're supposed to have 1 from each. The board members have set compensation at $300 per day in addition to travel. The administrator of the board is William Perkins, who has an annual salary of $390,000. He is appointed by the board. The board owns real property. They own a parking lot located at the corner of Adams Avenue and South Jackson Street in Montgomery, Alabama. The board has 49 employees. The Medical Licensure Commission's administrative functions and facilities are furnished by the board. For legal counsel, the Board of Medical Examiners employs 4 in-house attorneys. All attorneys are full-time employees of the board. Additionally, the board has legal services contracts with 3 attorneys outside of that. The board's website contains general information about the board, the commission and staff. There are minutes of meetings, laws, rules, contact information, license search and verification options. There's forms, license renewal information, complaint information. All of that can be found on their website. This board does not operate within the state's treasury. They operate from bank accounts held at Service First Bank and River Banking Trust. Their operating account, and they have a money market account at Service First, and then they have a checking account for payroll, and a money market account and a certificate of deposit at River Banking Trust. There are no required distributions of their funds, and they retain unused funds at fiscal year end. The licensees as of January 29th of 2024 total 24,424 licensees, and they also had certifications and registrations of 27,415. You do have to take a test to be licensed by this board. I know. Yes, ma'am. Those, the pass-fail rates are presented in the appendix of the report. There's a different examination, obviously, for each type of license issued. Those are all on page 12 and 13. We do have 2 medical doctor schools in Alabama, the University of Alabama Birmingham and the University of South Alabama. We have 2 doctor of osteopathy schools in Alabama, one in Dothan and one in Auburn. We have physician assistant schools in Alabama, Faulkner, Stanford, UAB, and the University of South Alabama. An anesthesiologist assistant school. It has just started in Auburn. Physicians' licenses are renewed annually. Assistant licenses are renewed annually, and the online renewal is available. And about 99% of licensees renew online. The board's significant issues start on page 15 of the report. The first one is that the board entered into separation agreements with 5 former employees without statutory authority to execute separation agreements. Only the Attorney General is empowered to settle litigation matters, including the settlement of administrative cases before they result in actual litigation. Additionally, it is noted the separation agreements with former employees contained a non-disparagement and confidentiality clause which required the employees to maintain the confidentiality of the terms, amounts, facts, and existence of the agreements. As a result of these unauthorized confidential separation agreements, former employees received the following undisclosed amounts. We have those listed there for the 5 employees. The second significant issue is that the Board of Medical Examiners and the Medical Licensure Commission did not post vacancy notices to the Secretary of State's website as required. The Board of Medical Examiners did not post vacancy notices at least 45 days before the expiration of 14 members' terms, and the Licensure Commission did not post vacancy notices 45 days before the expiration of 6 members' terms or within 15 days after 2 members resigned. The third significant issue is that the board is currently unable to verify the eligibility of Alabama physicians to obtain letters of qualification as required to participate in the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact. This is something that we worked together with on the board. Act number 2015-197 was passed to provide and adopt the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact in Alabama. The compact is an agreement among participating U.S. states and territories to work together to streamline the licensing process for physicians who want to practice in multiple states. It offers a voluntary expedited pathway to licensure. Currently, physicians from outside Alabama may present their letter of qualification from their state of principal licensure to the board and become licensed in Alabama. However, according to information provided by the board staff, in April of 2023, the FBI ordered Aaliyah to stop conducting background checks for the purposes of verifying letters of eligibility for letters of qualifications to Alabama physicians. The FBI's order stemmed from not being properly notified about the passage of the legislation authorizing the compact in Alabama. This stoppage means that physicians from Alabama are unable to obtain letters of qualification for the compact, thus not allowing them to participate in the compact. The board sought legislation to rectify this issue through Act Number 2023-233 and 2024-300. However, to date, the board is still unable to verify the eligibility of Alabama physicians to obtain letters of qualifications required to participate in the compact.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit? I mean, because as I understood the dilemma, it's a one-way compact with doctors coming into Alabama, but Alabama doctors are unable to utilize the compact to go to other states.
That is currently what is happening.
And even though we've done the legislation to rectify that,
the FBI order says that Aaliyah cannot conduct the background checks that are required in order to give Alabama physicians the letter of qualifications for them to participate in the compact to get licensed in other states.
so I guess I need to know what exactly do we need to do as Sunset to make sure that our Alabama doctors have the same opportunities?
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
That's the issue I wanted to talk about. I see representatives here from the Board of Medical Examiners. It seems to me that probably the quickest way to deal with this is to engage our federal delegation to get this resolved. But if they can't get this resolved pretty quick with the FBI, it sounds like they got a little case of hurt feelings, then maybe we need to shut down these out-of-state doctors, because I cannot tolerate Alabama doctors not having the same reciprocity that out-of-state doctors have.
So would it be appropriate to have somebody from Aaliyah here to explain, or is this, at what level do we need to have some more explanation?
From what we understand, the FBI ordered Aaliyah to stop. So Aaliyah, it's not like Aaliyah made the choice to stop.
Okay, who at Aaliyah said that they're the person that got told to be stopped? I guess that's the next person in. We need to bird dog this all the way to the end. Mary Ruth, will you try to get in touch with them and see what explanation we're gonna have for the time this hearing tomorrow? Any other questions?
Okay. The next two significant issues were from the survey responses that we received. 3 of the 10 physician licensees that responded to our survey indicated that the most significant issue facing their profession is poor reimbursement. We had 39 complainants whose complaints had been resolved within the past 2 years that responded to our survey. 41% of those indicated it took more than 30 days for the board to contact them after filing the complaint. 33% indicated that the board did not communicate the results of the investigation to them, and 61% of complainants do not think that the Board of Medical Examiners did everything it could to resolve their complaint. The testing of a sample of complaint files indicated that the board's system for handling complaints was adequate and there were no issues noted. That's all the significant issues that we had. On page 19, there is a listing of the employees and personnel of the board. On page 20, there is information regarding their attorneys. They have the in-house attorneys and the legal services contracts with 3 other attorneys. The licensing information for the past 4 fiscal years can be found on page 21. The total has gone from 21,000 to 24,000 for licensees since 2020 to 2023. And then the number of certificates or registrations issued has also increased over the last 4 years from 25,000 to 28,000. The board's percentage of fines as a percentage of their operating receipts is under 2%. For the last 4 years, the board received 1,627 complaints. As of January 11th, 2024, they had 1,439 of those resolved in an average time of 135 business days. And we did note that complaints that were older than 1 year are waiting to schedule an interview with the board, have pending expert review or evaluation, or have an ongoing federal or criminal investigation. How they dispose of the complaints is on page 24, with the majority being sent a standard response letter. Financial information about the board starts on page 25. There is a description of their bank accounts there. So the board has an operating account that it works out of and has a payroll account that it utilizes to pay their employees. They also have a certificate of deposit. Their fees are shown on pages 26 through 28. On page 29 is their schedule of receipts, disbursements, and balances. At the end of fiscal year 2023, they had an unobligated cash balance of $8,692,247.07. This balance includes the money market accounts and the certificate of deposit. Specifically, the certificate of deposit that they had, the balance at September 30th of 2023 was $347,836.18. There is exam information in Appendix 4 of your report, that is on pages 36 and 37. The professional services of the board are in Appendix 3 of the report, that can be found on page 131. We also have the board members listed and the licensure commission members listed.
Representative Simpson, I'm sure you'd like to be recognized.
Actually, on this one, we don't have a statutory requirement for congressional district representation, but MASSA requires a statutory congressional district for each one through there. And when we have required congressional district representation, strangely enough, South Alabama has representation. But that's just part of, and I think I've hit the nail on the head too many times with this, and that's bad for me to admit that I've done that. But I think we have an issue where if we don't make someone do it, they're not going to do it.
Well, I'm just proud there's two from Mobile and one from Daphne. Representative Shedd, you're recognized.
On page 1, when it describes the medical licensure commission has exclusive power and authority to issue, revoke, and so on the licenses. And then ultimately, the commission has the sole authority to issue medical licenses in Alabama. I've had the privilege of serving recently on the medical scholarship, trying to get scholarships for rural doctors in rural Alabama, which I very much appreciate. So it's good to see the number of on the first board there that are from small town Alabama. But I think it would be good if the actual Alabama Medical Licensure Commission had someone from small town Alabama to understand the different ways that the medical profession is in small town and rural Alabama. But appreciate what they're doing.
Okay, any other members seeking to be recognized? DC, did you finish your report, or do you have some more to go?
No, ma'am, that's all I have.
Okay. I'd like to remind the members that we have this license to work book that compares us to our other states in the union. That we have passed that around a little bit, but if you wanted an opportunity to look at that further, I have it at your disposal. We also have a stack of the handouts of an email that was sent to us yesterday. The email was forwarded to you, but if you'd like your own copy of the handouts, are right here in front of Mary Ruth that you can take and peruse. We have dinner tonight at 5:30, I'd like to remind you. And then Mary Ruth has told me that security is going to lock the door after we leave, so if you wanted to leave your reports where you're sitting, you're welcome to do that so that you don't have to carry everything back and forth. Is there any other announcements for the good of the committee that I need to make sure? All right, hearing no other business, we're adjourned.
Yes, Jason's the one.
Yeah, you can leave it all where you are.
That's good. Yeah, this is not.